Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on advice for supporting beginner scholarly writers and APA style. We'll get started momentarily. While we're waiting for everyone to log in, feel free to share where you're joining us from in the chat. Again, we'll get started in just a minute. We're right at the hour, right before the hour. So we'll give everyone a chance to get settled. Thank you for joining us today on our webinar on supporting beginner scholarly writing and APA style. I see the chat. Texas, North Carolina, Philippines, Canada, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our webinar for supporting beginner scholarly writing and APA style. We're just giving everyone a chance to get settled, and then we will take care of a little bit of business and then get started. So I just want to welcome everyone again. I'm going to start with a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone, all attendees are muted. We're just trying to prevent any accidental background noise, and we have enabled auto captioning for those that need it, that need a live transcript. That is ready to go. But chat is open, so please use it to communicate with your fellow attendees, your peers. If you want to ask a question of the panel that we have here today, I would encourage you to please use the Q&A feature. That way we can respond both live and in writing to any questions that may come up during this session. We are recording this session and it will be shared as soon as possible. That will also include captions and a chat transcript. And for all of those attending live today, you will receive an attendance certificate verifying that you were here. And that can be downloaded and added to any of your files or shared on LinkedIn. And so, again, welcome everyone today. Before I introduce our panel, I thought we'd start with a general question to you all, since what we're going to be discussing is beginner writing in APA style. We want to hear from you. So what are your biggest challenges in supporting beginner writing in APA style? So you can go ahead and share those responses in chat. We would love to hear from you. And I am going to go ahead and introduce our panel. So today joining us, we have Dr. Fadia Braktia, the Assistant Director at the Academic Success Center for Writing, Reading, and Humanities at Sam Houston State University. She is an educator with experience in teaching culturally and linguistically diverse students in elementary, secondary, and university settings. She is experienced in content-based and immersive language teaching and learning. She worked closely with teachers in addressing languages and cultural responsiveness in educational settings, with international experience working in Algeria, China, the United States, Costa Rica, and Russia. She earned a doctorate of education in literacy, as well as awarded a United States Fulbright Foreign Language Teaching Assistant grant. So welcome, Dr. Braktia. We're also joined by Dr. Ramon Dane, the director of the Academic Success Center at National University. Ramon has spent over 15 years engaging with students at the undergraduate and graduate levels. As a student support professional and faculty member, Ramon is an advocate for an inclusive and dynamic learning environment where each student's learning experience is personalized and meaningful. Ramon holds a doctorate of education specializing in English as a second language and several certifications, including Learning Center Leadership and SI Supervisor. So welcome, Dr. Danes. We're happy to have you. And from our APA style team, Samantha Denny and Chelsea Lee represent the APA style team of the American Psychological Association. They are members of the team responsible for writing and updating the 7th edition of the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, the Mastering APA Style Student Workbook, and the Concise Guide to APA Style. Together, this team has fielded more than 30,000 questions, written hundreds of blog posts, and spoken to countless people about APA style. They are passionate about APA style and excited to pass on their knowledge of effective scholarly communication, citations and references, and ethical, inclusive, and accessible writing. So we are so glad to have all of you here today. I will be posing questions to this panel about supporting students in beginner scholarly writing, helping them with APA style, and some of the challenges that they might face, and some of the challenges that you all face in teaching APA style. And I see a lot of great responses in chat. So thank you so much to all of you in attendance for sharing your experiences with us. And I hope that you continue to do so as we continue this session. Our first question to our panel is, how would you describe APA style to someone who is new to scholarly writing? I'm going to start with Chelsea on that. Chelsea?
Yes, thank you so much. So I've been in the position of explaining APA style for a long time now. A lot of times when I meet people, I'm like, oh, I do APA style. Do you know what that is? And a lot of times they say, no, they don't. And so one thing I look for are like points of commonality. Most people may have used like MLA style, and I'm saying like, oh, do you remember in your English classes you would use like the MLA style manual to write stuff about literature? Well, APA style is another writing style specifically designed for writing about people in science, and it covers all sorts of aspects of how you're going to do your writing. It addresses things like how you're going to do the format and how it looks. It addresses like the citations and references so that I can like explain the ideas to you and like where I got them from, and you can go look up the sources that I use to tell whether I'm full of it or not, like check whether I'm right. Um, and it addresses things like how to make graphs that communicate and you can get the information from them. And then additionally, stuff about the content, depending on what you're writing about. It would address like what kind of language to use to describe people so that you're treating them with dignity and respect, and that you can, or if you're like doing a research study and you're reporting what you did, it tells you what to put in there so other people can understand what you did and tell whether you've done a good job or whether there's some flaws that need to be addressed. And so it's about helping communicate ideas in writing and like making sure that the little details are checked off so that we can all sort of be on the same page.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add to that about how you introduce or talk about APA style to beginner scholarly writers? Yeah, Dr. Bractia, go ahead.
Yeah, I tend to use very simplistic language, and I would say that it is so you are going in your class, you're going to read research, and when you read the research, you're going to get ideas. Those ideas are not yours. So APA is going to show you how to report on these ideas and how to give credit to the person who put a lot of work on those ideas. And I say it's uniform because when I read your paper, we all use the same style, so I understand. So I look at it, and when you do in-text citation, you're signaling to me that this idea is not yours. So I understand, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I want to read more about this. So I go to the references, and I start like, I know where to find what. If I want the author, I know where to find the author. If I want the journal, I know where to find the journal. So I'm the person, I'm going to say this multiple times, it's just I simplify it for the students so that it makes sense in their head. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. All right, so our next question is about getting buy-in for using APA style, and that can be kind of challenging. So how do you get student and or even instructor buy-in for using APA style? Samantha?
Hey everyone. Well, a lot of times I like to bring it back to why do styles exist? And I talk about what Dr. Bractia mentioned in terms of having consistency, which allows you to focus less on the formatting of a paper and more on the content of what you're actually saying. If there's too much variation in format, in font, things like that, it can be distracting. So ultimately, we're trying to help them with communicating effectively. A lot of times, if they come from using MLA or another style, I like to talk about how styles are discipline specific. So every decision that we make at APA is about how do we help scientists and researchers communicate when they're talking about people and science. So if you think about nursing, various, speech language pathology, education, the commonality is they're talking about people, they're talking about science. So every decision we make that goes into our guidelines is to help facilitate that communication. So we're prioritizing things, like, for example, the date in an in-text citation that are really important for people in those disciplines. So sometimes that can help students understand why it might be important for them to write in a consistent way.
Does anyone have anything to add to that? Dr. Daines, yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, and to add to that wonderful response, I also share with students that when they are writing, they are actually giving their argument or their position on a point. And they really need to follow the APA style with being very clear, very concise, very inclusive, but they also need to use their in-text citations and references, because without those items, it's only their opinion. And at the end of the day, unless they're a known researcher, their opinion doesn't count. But their writing is so much stronger once they add in those citations. And they can say, it's not just me. All of these people say this as well.
Mm-hmm. We did have a comment in the chat that said, I try to make students see the bigger picture. What they are learning is not really for this class, but for their academic journey. So, great. Okay. So I think the next question that we're going to move on to, I think, is speaking a little bit to some questions that we're getting in Q&A, and that is ideas for teaching APA styles, not just talking about it or not getting buy-in, but actively teaching APA style. One of the questions that we got in Q&A is I would like some creative ideas about how to integrate APA writing guidelines. Telling students to read the style manual is not effective for all students. Dr. Braccia, I think we had a discussion about this yesterday, so I would love it if you would kick this off.
Yeah, I have experimented with teaching APA multiple times and I failed. But I think I found the way. The way is that, first of all, do not assume that students know. And do not say, go use the manual without any support. The manual is amazing, but your students are not going to touch it if you don't show them how to use it. I used to teach multiple literacies, and I asked my students to get all these informations and do YouTube and do this, and then I never taught them how to do an in-text citation or what it even meant to use outside resources. So the best way is to invest time in the beginning of the semester to teach your student what you need from them, because like APA style, what are you using from APA style? Take those like your learning goals and invest in teaching your students on how to use whatever. If you're focusing on in-text citation and references, you teach them. If you ask them to use YouTube videos and they need to in-text them and reference them, take a moment to show them how it looks like. Then do it together with them. Let's do it together in the classroom. Then give them an example. Do it by yourself and then have them like do a peer review to each other so they correct each other's mistake. Give them an example that they have hands on. Give them pages. Say it is on this page of the manual. If you're lost, you missed class, you don't know, you're still confused, check the manual, this page exactly in the manual. Refer to your writing center. If you want to collaborate, I supervise the writing tutors. They send their students to me. We work with a lot of faculty, I usually meet with them because I say, what are you using from the APA style? Give me detailed instructions. I will share those with my writing tutors. When your students show up to the center, we know exactly what to do because you have already told us what are your requirements when it comes to APA style. So I think it is scaffolding, do the model I do, you do, we do, and examples and detailed instructions. My motto is instructions, instructions, instructions. Yes.
Yeah, Chelsea, please go ahead.
I have a thought sort of continuing that line of thinking from Dr. Bractia is that like the manual, I have one here. It's organized. Oh, it doesn't want to, it's blurring it, but it's organized in the order of the writing process. The first chapter is about what kinds of papers that you might even be writing and what are considerations for writing papers. Also considerations for like doing research, like you have to follow ethical guidelines if you're doing research with people. If someone's like, you know, taking a psychology 101 and they're imagining like the research that they're going to do, you know, like you have to learn about ethical guidelines and how to treat people and that you can't be mean and manipulate them. Like, so like that's at the beginning, and then stuff about sort of general format, little details. And then as it goes on, you have the details of how to do your citations and references. And then at the very end of the manual is information about how to publish your research, which isn't going to apply to everyone who's in a student context. But like if you do go into a career, like it's taking you from beginning to end of the writing process. And like the index is great. I made sure when we wrote it that like there's a section called font for you to look up the answer about what font is. And so like rather than it being buried in a section about like paper format and you're not sure that that means font. And so I do think that like specific questions that people have, you can use the structure of the book to look up the answers. You can also use the APA style website to look up the answers. Go in the search bar and type in font and you're going to find the page on font that's going to explain the answer to your question. And so I'm often emphasizing that like the manual is not a novel. Please do not read it from beginning to end. Like that sounds exhausting. Like look up the things that you need to know when you need to know them. And over time you start remembering and you don't have to look it up so much.
Yeah.
That's the line that I take.
Great. Thank you. I think this perfectly segues into a discussion that's already happening in chat right now. So I wanted to present the question to you all, and that is what resources you recommend for teaching and writing in APA style. I know everyone has a response to this, but I think I'll start with Dr. Daines on if there's any resource that you recommend for APA style.
Absolutely. Yes. To begin with, I always start with the manual. That's the great place to begin. But then to start building from that and understand that all of our students need information in different ways. And it's up to us to make sure it's very multimodal and engaging. So another tool that I like to use is also Academic Writer because it's the APA manual coming to life. In addition, using that APA website that we were just speaking about, as well as for our university, we actually have a university website that is full of APA information, but couched within that is information directly from the manual and from Academic Writer. And the reasons for all of these different touch points is that each one of our students learn differently. So we need to make sure there's graphic organizers, there's videos, there's everything possible to make sure that they have what they need when they need it. And the more accessible it is, the more that they can practice, the more they're more likely to apply it going forward.
Thank you. Does anyone want to add on to that, their favorite resources for teaching APA style? Samantha, go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. Daines. I completely agree with you on those resources. Another thing I wanted to mention is we recently released a new kind of part of our APA Style webpage called APA Style for Beginners. And there we have a ton of information, including instructional guides, we have handouts. And somebody in the chat, I noticed, asked about how do I teach APA Style if it's not the main part of the class? Maybe, you just go over a few things within a different type of class. And some of those handouts can be really, really good, and it can work in coordination with whatever content you're teaching at the time. We feel like teaching APA Style over time, instead of kind of, putting it in one class or an hour-long session before a paper is due, it's best to teach it throughout the curriculum alongside the content that you're working on. So we have a lot of really fantastic information. Dr. Bractia mentioned teaching students how to use the manual. We have the APA Style manual lookup activity. So if you have students who don't know how to use a reference text, that's a really great way to get them started.
Dr. Bractia, please go ahead. I was having difficulty unmuting myself, and I did put a link to the manual lookup activity in the chat.
Yes, I wanted to praise that. So I am very student-centered, and I like engaging handouts. A handout that for me that has just words in it, students are reluctant to use. But the APA Style organization have amazing handouts that students, that are activities that you can use with the student in the classroom. All you have to do, so what I usually do when I meet with faculty and they say, we're working on MPA, this is what we need. I say, tell me, what are your learning goals? So I identify their learning goals and I make them packets of handouts. I go to the APA website and then I look what handouts that are engaging and student-centered that faculty can use, and I put it together and I share it with faculty, and faculty can share it with students. And I share it also with my tutors, so that they say, if someone comes to you and they're writing their discussion about research, here are the phrases you can use. Here's they have everything organized, phrases you can use. If you're writing an abstract, this is how you write it. So those are handouts that are super helpful for you, for your students, and for the writing center. If you're part of a writing center, just make packets. I call them packets. So I always identify your learning goals and make packets that align from those handouts with your learning goals.
That's so cool about the handouts. I'm so glad that they're like useful to you. And I wanted to point out that a lot of the handouts on our site have come from the community. They've come from people who contacted APA Style team and are like, hey, I made this and I think it's really good. I think it's really effective. What do you think? And a lot of times we agree and we say yes. And we like reformat it to make it kind of match the look of all the other ones, put it on there. And in the bottom, it says, thank you to this person for giving us that. So like, if you've got something that you're like, I developed this, but I don't see anything like it on the APA Style website, send it to us. And we will put it on there so that everybody can benefit, and you're not having to like reinvent the wheel every time that you want to teach APA Style. Like the resources are ready to go. So if you want to send it, it's styleexpert@apa.org, and I'm sure they'll put it in the chat too, but that's like our general style team email address.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. Love crowdsourcing. It's great. Dr. Daines, there was a question in the Q&A and in the chat about Academic Writer. I was just wondering if you could just elaborate on what it is and how your institution uses it.
Absolutely, I'm happy to. Academic Writer is amazing. Once you get on the site, you have 3 different sections that you can look at. One is the Learn site, and this is absolutely phenomenal because it brings all the little pieces of the APA manual to life, and it has lots of tutorials where, especially for online students, they can be assigned a tutorial and the faculty member can ask for proof that they completed that tutorial on a variety of different topics. It also shows some wonderful sample papers that are also available, or sample figures and tables that are also available on the APA website. There's a section in there for developing references and lots of templates, including the newest one that was just added is for referencing AI, which is something our students really need to know how to do. And it stores those references, so it becomes a longer term reference house, so to speak. And then there's also the write area. And it's amazing because it doesn't write the paper for the student. The student still needs to know APA style to use this amazing tool, but it helps them integrate the pieces of APA style in a better way. Like if they're using headings and things like that, they can really do that within that program. And then they can export it in Word, review it themselves, look at the manual to make sure they followed things correctly, and then submit their documents.
Great, thank you so much for elaborating on that, Dr. Daines. And you have just led me into my next question about AI. So already gotten lots of questions about it in Q&A. We have lots that were pre-submitted. So I am just wondering, from our panel, what is your advice for handling AI? There were some questions on citing AI. I think Chelsea, I'll start with you on this because
Sure.
you do
I'd
have
be
some
happy to.
resources. Yeah.
First, I would like to acknowledge that we are all living in the same world that you are living in. Like, there's not like a secret memo that we got about what to do that you don't have. Like, we're watching it happen in real time and like using our knowledge to figure out what's the path and like listening to you all to figure out what's the path. And so I guess to start off in terms of like, how do you cite AI? We have a blog post about that we can link in the chat that's got the citation format. The citation format to use is the software template. Conveniently, all APA style references are author, date, title, source. 4 pieces, author, date, title, source. And the one for AI models is that as well. And so like you're just use business as usual as far as that's concerned. But I feel like once you get past addressing how do you cite it, like you're in a whole nest of questions of how are you using it and why and can you trust it? And that some of the questions that have come to us at APA have been like, are authors who are writing professional manuscripts using AI? Can AI be an author? If you'd asked AI to write your paper, like, can you do that? And some of them we're answering as we go. For example, the journal's policy is no, AI cannot be an author because AI is not a responsible legal entity. Like, it's not a person, it's the computer generating new stuff, but the stuff it's generating it from is us. Like, it's human stuff on the internet that it's reproducing. And so I feel like the key is to like, I don't know, not hide from it, I think. Because I've been thinking, how does the AI relate to my work? You know, can I get the internet to do my job for me? And like, no, I can't. But I like kind of try it out. And so I feel like going into it with openness and saying, hey, what if we asked ChatGPT to write your paper? What would it do? And then we went and looked, did it do a good job? How could you tell if it did a good job? You know, sometimes it fabricates references that aren't real. You can go through and say, hey, maybe there are some flaws here. And I've read some like articles about teachers who did that kind of exercise with their students in the class. And we're like, hey, what if this was the magic bullet? Let's check and see if it is. And then by the end, the students were like, oh, I see. I need to be much more careful and judicious before I just do whatever AI says. And so I feel like that's sort of the attitude toward solving the problem that I feel like is productive. But I would be interested to hear too from the other panelists, like, how are you encountering this question and what are you doing with it?
Dr. Daines, go ahead.
I think it's really important, you know, as universities, we need to have, you know, each one will have its own policy related to AI. But I think it's really important that we embrace it and know it's not going away. It's kind of to writing what the calculator was to math, and to really use it in a responsible way. Because I mean, AI can be great. You can ask that, like a student that's struggling with articles can ask, please give me, some examples of how to properly use articles and why I should. And that's an important thing to learn. And it's something that the student can work on there and kind of generate some ideas. But I really feel that, yeah, you're right. It's not going anywhere. And it's that we need to use it responsibly. I believe it's the APA journal that has required now, if an author does use AI for anything, that they have to put that in the appendices of their article. And I think that is wonderful. And I think maybe that's something we should possibly explore for our students as well, is that if you did use it, put it in there, acknowledge the use, and then how did you learn from that and build from that to make your deliverables specifically to you and in your voice.
Yeah, Dr. Bracte, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Diggins, for that amazing response. When it comes to writing, I teach integrated reading and writing, which is a developmental writing course. When your focus is the writing process, is that I found like when ChatGPT, they would put my writing prompt and generate and copy and paste, and you can understand it. Like you read the first paragraph and you're like, nope, you wouldn't be in this class if you were able to write like that. So I started scaffolding. The writing process and focused on each step. So there's no way for them to copy and paste the writing prompt. What I also do to get that like research mindset in their critical thinking skills, I would say gradually read papers. So we would read a paper and I would ask them to identify the ideas that they liked from their paper and add them to their outline and do in-text citation. Like the first draft doc, don't just identify the ideas, remember where you got it from and put it in your outline. Does it go here? Does it go in your introduction? Does it go, where does it go? And then at the end, they already have that draft. Like they already have something built that we spend the whole semester working on. It's not one writing prompt that they go to ChatGPT. That's from the faculty point of view. Scaffolding helps and take them through the steps of reading and writing at the same time. As a writing center, we don't have the authority to report anyone if they say so, but we ask what the syllabus says. What does your professor say on using ChatGPT? A lot of our professors, some of them do say no, some of them do not include a ChatGPT policy. So we have to ask the first thing, what's the policy? Then what we do, and if we know we can't report, and I tell the tutors to not write that they told them that it's ChatGPT in their report, but I say help them fix it. Show them where the problem is. Like, you're redundant, you're not making any sense, you're robotic, and help them go through what ChatGPT gave them and fix it, and show them the skills of empower them to revisit what ChatGPT does. That's how we handle it in the Writing Center.
Thank you so much. I know we could probably talk forever about generative AI and ChatGPT and implications and what it means, and but I appreciate everyone's thoughts and feedback on that. There is another question here in the Q&A that I think is really interesting. So Laura asks, our university has a growing population of multilingual writers, so I've noticed there can sometimes be confusion between the word source used generally as pieces of research and source used specifically the entity of the publication. Do you have recommendations on terminology that is concise but also distinct between those meetings? I'm going to also post this in chat so y'all can look at it, because I know it was a very long question, but I think generally, like, how do we deal with multilingual writers and terms that they may not be familiar with or may have multiple meanings? I'm gonna go, who would like to answer this question? Chelsea, she
Oh, I know
unmuted
the answer to this
herself.
question.
Okay.
This is the problem of having one word that means two disparate things. And you say you're thinking about talking about this one, but it's really the other one. So what we've done in the APA style manual, when we use the word source, it depends on the context. Usually we meet when you're talking about like a work, like a book or an article, that's the source. We'll call that a kind of work or a reference type. We'll use that kind of language. And you'll see that language in the manual. So I'm saying so when I say what kinds of sources, what kinds of references are there in the world? You might say, oh, well, there's journal articles, there's newspaper articles, web pages, reports, books, these different kinds of reference types. And then within that, remember earlier I talked about every reference having 4 parts: author, date, title, source. In that one, the 4 parts are answering 4 questions. So author answers who, date answers when, title answers what's the name of it, and source answers where did you get it from? And so that would be like the journal and the DOI for a journal article, or like the URL if it's coming from a web page. Like, how do I get to it is the source. And so oftentimes we APA style pros are using source in a more like limited and focused way than I think the students are. And I think just like educating people on like, this is the terms we're trying to agree on as a community so we can talk to each other and not get trapped by synonyms is helpful.
Is there anyone else that would like to tackle that? Yeah, Dr. Bractia.
I just want to talk from pedagogy wise. I think it is better if you put the definition. If you're using source as a reference, just put it in there and select what do you want students to use. I worked with a nursing faculty and she was amazing. Because I would say use 3 resources or 3 sources or whatever, it is very broad. But if you define what you mean by source or reference or whatever, and then tell them what do you mean, is it peer-reviewed articles? Is it your classroom book? Is it videos? Like, give them exactly what you want from them. Clear instructions, define it, and then I think that would help. It helps you, it helps the student, and it helps the Writing Center. I'm here to talk on behalf of the Writing Center. When a student show up with instructions, we can help. So just detail it, explain it to them what it is.
Great, thank you so much. I'm gonna turn it over for a second to Cambria, my fellow marketing manager here at APA. She has a question from the Q&A that she'd like to pose.
Thanks, Andrea. We got a question from Joseph, and I think we could look at this question a couple different ways, but he's asking for those of us who are either teaching online or, for maybe non-traditional students who are only learning online. Do you have any tips for those situations specifically? Dr. Daines, I know you mentioned sometimes academic writer comes in particular focus there, but if anyone has anything they want to add on that note. Yeah, Dr. Daines.
Yes. So when you're working online, it's imperative that you are engaged with your student. And I know that takes a little bit extra time, but it's well worthwhile. And to understand that your red pen, as from a faculty perspective, the red pen that you're using can really be harsh and really lower the student's identity, academic identity, and their ability to be a student. And instead, what we need to do is scaffold that learning. And in our feedback, not only provide that online student with what's wrong with the red pen, really redact that red pen just a little bit, and instead give them the why, maybe point out their strengths, definitely. So you always want to start from a strength-based. You need to give them the why of what changes you would recommend. And not only that, but how to change it. Give them an example so that you're rolling it up into one big package. And what I really like to do as a faculty person is also provide a video where not only am I writing this out, but I'm also walking the student through how to make these changes. But that video also starts and ends with the strengths so that that learner identity is built up. So that would be my recommendation.
Anyone else on online learning? I know Dr. Deans has a great perspective on that, as a lot of online students. All right. Let's see here. The next question I'd like to ask is about inclusive language, and I think we may have mentioned inclusive language a little bit earlier, but it's a very important part of APA style, is writing inclusively. And so I was just wondering how you talk about using inclusive language with beginner scholarly writers, because it's not something that they may have been considering writing in other styles or writing previously. Chelsea, do you want to start?
Sure thing. So I love talking about this. I think it's something that is like in our advice about inclusive language is something that's really special about APA style. Because ultimately what it is all of these scientists and counselors and social workers worked with people of all varieties of people. They worked with them, and those people said, this is how we want you to talk about us. And the scientists wrote it down, and they called us, and we summarized it, and then we're giving it to you to say, people who have whatever characteristics, this is the language that right now is the most respectful that you can be. And so part of this is understanding your values as a person, that you're going to choose language that treats other people with dignity and respect. And part of it's awareness building, because depending on who you are and where you come from, you have certain experiences that others don't. And so like maybe you're from a place where like everyone's just like you, and then you go off to college and all of a sudden there's all sorts of different people and you're like, wow, this is new to me, and you end up putting your foot in your mouth unintentionally, you know, and you need to learn more. And so the guidance about inclusive language covers different categories, different personal characteristics that people have. Those are age, disability, gender, race and ethnicity, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. We've got lots of information about those, but it also applies to other topics too. We could talk about like immigration status or marital status, lots of different categories. And so I feel like as you write or do research in different areas, your work might intersect with one of those qualities, and that would be an opportunity to learn more about it. So like if you're in like maybe a developmental psychology class, which is about people of all different ages, that would be an opportunity to learn about the words for people of different ages. And so, for example, we recommend calling older adults, and not calling them the elderly, which is more like belittling, like. And so that's just one example. And we have a great handout on the APA Style website that they'll stick the link to it in the chat, called the Brief Guide to Bias-Free and Inclusive Language. And it's just a one-page summary of like the principle of using inclusive language and some examples for those topic areas that I mentioned, because there's lots of guidance that you can read, and it's all on the website, it's all there. But that one-page handout can be like a good introduction to sort of like even turn on the idea in your head that this is something that you should be paying attention to, because I think not everybody notices until it's pointed out to them, and then they can start like being more proactive in the language that they use.
Dr. Braccia.
Thank you, Chelsea. I loved the handout.
Oh, thank
So
you.
I loved it. I saw it when we were working together the other day. And I think it's amazing because it gives you the guidelines and the preferred examples and the problematic examples. So that is a lesson plan for you right there. If if avoiding biased language is one of your learning goals in one module or section of your course, that is like, this is going to help you develop a mini lesson where you teach students, you give them an example, this is a preferred example, this is a preferred example, and have an activity in class. Have this handout given to your students, collaborate with your writing center, say my priority when the student come to you is that I want them to look at bias free. I want to look at this is what I want. Have the handout sent to either the writing center or to their students, and that you have like 3 people helping you in this aspect of APA style.
Great, thank you so much. Oh, Samantha, yes.
One small thing I wanted to add is a lot of times there can be some trepidation over the fact that inclusive language guidelines change over time. And they do, and we're going to keep updating them as it relates to social situations, what's going on in the world. So, you know, they will change, and that's okay. You know, that we're already on the 2nd edition of the inclusive language guidelines. As society changes, the words that we use, it's always going to change, and it's nothing to be afraid of.
Thank you. And I just wanted to share one small comment in chat that I thought was great. Students find the inclusion of inclusive language very empowering. I've seen some of my students flourish after covering pronouns, sexist language, and inclusive language. So that's wonderful.
That's so exciting to hear. One of the things, use the singular they. Please do it. Put it in your papers. Like,
Mhm.
that's important. When we were revising that section of the manual, the people who were on the committee, they recommended that. I think we're a little bit like, they weren't sure what we were going to think, because a lot of people came from a more pedantic writing instruction in their life, being like, no, you must say he or she, or like have the more like, which itself at one time was being seen as more inclusive, because before that was just generic he. And we were delighted with singular they. We're like, yes, let's put it in there. And reactions are kind of all across. Like, some people are delighted and other people are aghast, but there's lots of ways to write a sentence. and the singular they is one of them. So
Mhm. So I wanted to ask about a question that I've seen come up in various iterations during this session is either common mistakes that students make or like the must teach items for APA style. Samantha, do you want to start off on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I've heard a lot about is that students often struggle kind of on that reading comprehension, synthesizing information, and paraphrasing end of it. And as I mentioned before, excuse my dog in the back, it's great to teach APA style throughout the curriculum in pieces. So when you are teaching, you know, research methods or intro to psychology, and you're having students read an article, it can be really helpful to teach them what are the parts of a paper. You know, what am I going to find in the method section? What's an abstract? We actually have a great guide to that called Anatomy of a Journal Article that we can pop in the chat. So as they're just starting to explore being, you know, a good consumer of information, they can start to learn a little bit about APA style. Then I also wanted to recommend, we have a research article activity, which is going to take them through the process of finding a journal article, crafting an in-text citation and a reference list entry, and then comprehending and using their critical thinking skills to reflect on that article and then turn that into paraphrasing. So it's kind of like you have to read before you write. So that's something that I've I found can be very helpful.
Anyone else on what we can do to help students avoid common mistakes or something that you feel like is a must teach with APA style? Dr. Daines?
Well, one thing I would like to kind of piggyback off of what Samantha was talking about teaching that paraphrasing piece. And that is so critical for our students. And because many students feel that that researcher already said it so well, how can they say it in, how can they change that? And so a lot of times I will speak with students about have that conversation. Have a conversation with your reader that you just ran into them at the local coffee shop. You don't have all these articles with you, but how do you talk about your topic? And then that's where you go in. And after you've had that conversation in your mind's eye, that's where you can add in your citations, because you know where you had that information and where you found that. And in your paper, you add that as your parenthetical citations with your author and your year. And hopefully, not often, you'll use quotes where you have to add in that page or paragraph number. But just make it as it's a natural thing to have that conversation with the reader.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, we are 10 minutes out, so I'm gonna try and do a lightning round here. We have had quite a few questions about multimodal projects and presentations. So would anyone like to address using APA style in PowerPoint presentations or like other things besides a dedicated research project? Or research paper, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Chelsea, go ahead.
I have some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Like, we get that a lot. We get that question a lot. Like, how do I do a PowerPoint presentation in APA style? And like, we thought about like, okay, what does that mean? Like, are we gonna make one template and then every PowerPoint presentation is gonna look the same everywhere? And like, I wasn't sure that I wanted to live in that world. That sounded kind of sterile and like all the individuality would be gone. Instead, I think about what aspects of APA style can I take with me? And if I'm giving a presentation, one thing that's really important is that people be able to read the information that's on the slides. If your font is too small or you have wall of text, that does not create a conducive reading experience for the user. And so APA style is all about clear communication. So you need to be more judicious in how much your text you're going to put on there and make sure that it's big enough that people sitting at the back of the room can read it. Likewise, if you have like references in your presentation, you could do it a lot of different ways. You could put the reference kind of like at the bottom of the slide in the corner and put it in the APA style reference list entry. You could put them at the back. It's more about like, it's there somewhere for people that they can figure out where to find it. Another thing with presentations is regarding color contrast, which is like, there's tons of information about that online, to make sure there's enough contrast so that like people who maybe have low vision can still read it, or people who have like different kinds of color blindness can still read it, so that you don't have like this graph and your friend who has red-green color blindness is like, all the bars look the same to me. Like, you have to choose something that's gonna be able to reach everybody. And then additionally, lots of principles about like, how do you write a sentence and what words are you using, inclusive language choices, all of those apply over. And then there's still room for you to like make your presentation look how you want it to look, make it look nice, customize it. It's about like celebrating and elevating the writer, not like trying to like squash you and turn it into a robot.
Great. Dr. Daines?
One thing I would like to add to that is also when you are presenting, if at all possible, please turn on your captioning. The audience should never have to ask the presenter to do something to make it to where they can hear it. As a presenter, it's our responsibility. And APA always tells us to be very inclusive in everything we do. And that's just one of the points that we have to make sure we do.
That's great. Yes, that is definitely on my checklist for every webinar. Like number one, make sure closed captioning is active. So we are short on time. I do want to reiterate that this recording will be sent to everyone. It will also include the chat transcript. Thank you so much for all of the questions that were submitted today. We were definitely not able to get to all of them, so we'll do our best to answer some of those in writing. Maybe we'll post them on the APA style blog or something. That's up to the powers that be. I don't, but we'll do something to get you more. But I wanted to thank everyone for being here today, and our panelists and our wonderfully engaged attendees. I think the last question that I want to pose, and Chelsea or Samantha, you'll have to answer this, but there have been lots of questions about a new edition of the manual and what is happening with that. So do we have new? Yeah, Samantha, go ahead.
Yes, so the 8th edition is not forthcoming because we have not written it yet.
Yeah.
It
So-
doesn't exist.
It does not exist. However, what I will say is we tend to release a new edition every 7 to 10 years, and it's really based on a combination of feedback from people like you, people all over the world, our different journal teams and things like that, our membership, and what is needed from society. So if you think about the differences between the 6th and the 7th edition, think about all of the different social media and things like that that didn't even exist in 2009. So we still have quite a long time to be using the 7th edition. So don't worry.
Great. I did not mean to scare anyone. I apologize for those in chat who are like, oh my gosh, you scared me. I thought there was a new edition coming ASAP. That was not my intention. I apologize. Also, before we sign off, there were a lot of questions about what to do when you know someone is using an older edition, like the 6th edition. Does our style team have any advice on how to gently recommend using the newer edition?
Gently recommend them to use the newer edition. Like there was like a crossover time,
Yeah.
right? Where people were in the midst of projects and such, and they didn't want to have to redo everything. But like the 7th edition came out 4 years ago. I feel like that's over. And
Yeah.
the 7th edition is better. Like
It's student friendly.
Yeah,
It really is.
good. Yeah, it's better. Like
Yeah.
it's more sensible. The citation formats are easier. Like, so
Yes.
hopefully people will be excited to embrace the 7th edition.
Yeah, and as Samantha mentioned, I mean, changes in technology, changes in social media. I mean, a lot of those things are in the 7th edition that are not in the 6th edition. So
Yeah.
we want to make sure that, we're being as accurate and timely as possible.
Yeah, and I would add to that, it's I think really nice how robust a lot of the guidelines are. That
Mhm.
even though society is changing and new things are happening all the time, a lot of the principles that are part of APA style keep working. Like the principle of calling people how they want to be called works, even if they say, today I have, new thoughts, but the main principle is still there. And so I think that like certain things are going to keep being true, like the author, date, title, source, and like the idea of showing where you got information from, like that's going to keep being true. And so as you emphasize those points to the students, that can be something that they take with them, because like someone pointed out, like not everybody is going to go into a career where they're going to be writing academic papers and publishing them, and that's fine. Not going to graduate college and then go live under a rock, right? Like you're still going to be engaging with society, and like maybe you're reading a news article and you're like, man, the conclusions here sound a little suspicious, and you go look up the science that the article was based on, and because you studied APA style, you can read the article, tell what it's saying, and understand whether like a news piece is doing a good job of interpreting the research, because a lot of times they don't. And APA style skills help you understand whether whether it's real communication that's happening, and it can help you be a better communicator. That, you know, if your friend's like, I read such and such in the news, and you're like, actually, I read the original study and this is what the original study says, and like we can help like have better, clearer information exchange among all people.
Mhm. That's great. Thank you so much, Chelsea. And I think that is a great point, a great place to end our webinar. Again, thank you to everyone who attended, and a special thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Dr. Daines and Dr. Bractia, for being here in the midst of your busy days working with faculty and students. And thank you to Samantha and Chelsea. And thank you to my partner in crime, Cambria, for being here as well and helping out. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for attending our session. Again, the recording and the chat transcript will be sent to you, so you won't miss out on anything. And we appreciate all of your time and effort. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.